Let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, man, because a couple weeks ago when we were chatting, like that came up. And I want to ask you how you define imposter syndrome.
There's a number of different ways that it manifests, but I guess the basic part of it is not feeling like you belong in the room. That could look like a
Mm,
lot of things. It could look like these guys are quote unquote real musicians. I don't play an instrument. These guys have I couldn't say this before, but these guys have plaques. Like
mm,
who am I? Even like Sidechain, there's a shout out to Sidechain, which is how I know you. A bunch of really talented people and a bunch of really, really knowledgeable things in lots of different things. And there sometimes I feel like an imposter because like, name drop Polly. Polly is like
mm.
a brilliant dude, an incredibly musician, mixing engineer. Like he just seems like he's the guy that knows everything about everything. And
Yeah, shout out to Polly.
shout out
Legend.
to Polly.
Yeah.
But when you're in those spaces, it's kind of sometimes it's difficult to like not challenge it, but just kind of like say your piece that doesn't match up with that,
Mm.
without feeling like, this dude is clearly brilliant. Who am I to say anything that opposes it? So that's part of imposter syndrome. I think it manifests in a lot of different ways. I think a major one for me is perfectionism.
Mm.
I feel like everyone else shit is perfect and I see
Mm.
all the flaws in mine. I don't see any of their flaws. I just hear the vibe and it's perfect. Like, and clearly that's not the case. We're all artists. Everyone got flaws in every one of their things, and we all see it from the inside. From the outside, it's never apparent. But yeah, that's kind of how it affects me. And I'm forgetting things or missing points that other people would make about imposter syndrome. But I'm 100% certain that everyone goes through it on some levels. And in the off case that you don't go through it at all, probably not that good of an artist. Sorry. Because like there's got to be like some
Let's
level
go.
of imperfection for it to be genuine to me,
Yeah. Mm. Yeah,
which is
sort of like maybe the imperfections are what make it sort of beautiful
right,
or
right.
real.
Yeah. And I mean, it's even bad calling it imperfections. I mean, it just kind of everyone's got a fingerprint. It's one's not better than the other. It's just different.
Mm.
So it's a lifelong journey trying to embrace those quote unquote imperfections. And I'll let you know if I ever get there, but I don't foresee it happening.
Right on. I mean, you mentioned that example of sort of like, I'm in this room, these dudes have plaques, I don't. Now that you have a plaque, has that done anything to like ease the existence or the struggle with imposter syndrome for you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Mm,
I've reached a lot of quote unquote accomplishments, and I feel like everyone, um, it almost feels to a degree that I don't deserve it, or that I didn't earn it, or that it was luck, or that I just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right beat, or it's never about, oh shit, I worked really hard at this shit for however many years. Like 30 years is when I've been releasing music. I've been
mm,
making longer than that. So it's like, it's this weird thing in me. And again, I've spoken to a lot of people. I've read books on the topic. It's not uncommon and it's pretty normal, but it's something that you have to keep at bay for it to be a productive thing and not something that just beats you down. But yeah, no, getting a plaque did not make me feel any like, oh, I did it. I belong. Now let's fucking go. I
yeah.
I don't suspect I'll ever fully get there.
Well, allow me to speak for myself as well as anybody listening, man. And you definitely deserve it. And we're all super proud.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I'm
Absolutely.
I like hearing myself speak about it kind of makes me think that maybe I'm coming off as like this guy who's like beating himself down. It's not that at all. There's definitely
Hmm.
waves of like, I'm fucking proud. I got a plaque and I know it's a beat that I made that I really like and that happened. But then there's also the other side. There's always multiple voices going and kind of oddly enjoy it because it keeps me pushing to improve
Mm.
because I'm never fully satisfied. with where I am. So, if I'm not satisfied here, I got to keep moving forward, right?
Right. So, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of hinting at some strategies that you use to manage imposter syndrome and some of the challenges that you feel, kind of the conflict you experience internally as a producer. So, maybe you can share some strategies or some ideas or thoughts that you've come across that have been helpful in managing that, because I do agree and tend to think that we all experience it and it does manifest in different ways. But I think there's a high likelihood that it's like there are strategies that have overlap and can work in different contexts for different people.
Oddly, I made a post about this at the end of last year because the year before I did a lot. I released 2 albums, a vinyl, CD, cassette that sold really well, got a lot of praise. I released a single every Friday for 85% of the year. I just did a lot. I was constantly doing things. I was doing shows. I don't even know how many shows, but it was more shows than I'd done in years through events. And I was just hustling. And then the next year, I didn't release anything at all. In 2022, I did not release one thing. I didn't really make much. But at the end of the year, I was kind of beating myself up and I sat down and I literally wrote everything that I did do. Didn't think of the things I didn't do. I just wrote all the things I did do. And the Lloyd Banks thing was in there. Got a plaque. I did a bunch more shows. I did my first out of state beat sets. I flew to Oakland to do a few shows. It's just kind of like, I mean, there's a lot more on that list, but like that moment of just looking at it all on the page. And here it was like beating myself up about not accomplishing shit in this year. And I'm like, oh shit, I actually did. I just didn't accomplish it in the ways that I'm used to, which is releasing records. So that was a huge thing for me. And it literally just happened by accident. It wasn't like a grand plan, like I'm gonna write a gratitude journal or anything like that. It was just kind of like I literally was at the end of the year and I was like, I gotta make a post kind of summing up my year, but I didn't really do anything. And I was like, just started writing down. I was like, oh, okay, I could sum this up. So like that was one of the big things. Another thing that I kind of have to mention, and I've mentioned this a number of times in a number of places and on social media, it's a book that kind of speaks to all of this, including imposter syndrome and just kind of art. And it's the title of the book says it all. It's called Art and Fear. And it just kind of deals with every way that an artist deals with fear and how to cope with fear. It's not that it gives you strategies for me, and it does, but for me, the book was really helpful in that it'll talk about famous artists. And it's not musicians really. I mean, sometimes it is musicians, but it's like Mozart or Bach or something. It's not like, I'm not talking to Black Thought or anything, but you know, but they'll just kind of tell you that they went through this thing, and I'm like, holy shit, that's exactly what I'm going through. And they're fucking Picasso. Like he had trouble appreciating his own work, and that was just kind of eye opening for me as always being kind of the guy who felt like he was on the outside looking at this place that he wanted to be, not really ever taking the time to notice that I was there, if that makes sense. So I think that's really important, is to look back and to look where you are, where you've been, in order to push yourself where you're going.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's easy to feel like you're going through these kinds of things by yourself, but these are things that other people have experienced. And so just getting that visibility, I think, can do a lot. So
Right.
I'll make sure to get this book and we'll link it in the show notes and in the description of this video for people. Are there any other books that kind of come to mind that have been helpful to you in dealing with kind of these conflicts?
There are a million.
Maybe give us your top few.
There are others that don't necessarily speak to this. but give techniques that help with. It's kind of weird because this doesn't really fall into this, but like getting things done is super helpful in making you feel good about the things, feeling good about yourself, feeling. I feel like talking to a lot of producers and a lot of artists, I see a lot of the big problem is not getting things finished or to a point where they feel they're finished. And I know people who are super talented and 15 years later, they haven't released a thing and their stuff is worth it, but they're always waiting for this perfect moment. So there's a book, which I'm sure many people probably know about it, but it's called Power of Less. And this guy also wrote another book called Zen to Done. And it's really just a productivity book, has nothing to do with art per se, but it's something that I use every day. Literally, it changed the way I approached everything in life, but in music, it changed the way I approach making music, changed the way I approach releasing music, the business side, the marketing side, and it. I'll just break it down very simply, but the book goes more in more detail. Is that every day you wake up, you should be doing something, whether no matter how small it is, that's pushing you towards this big goal of yours. Generally, it's 3 tasks per day called most important tasks. So every day I wake up, I write down the 3 things that I'm going to get today that work toward this other thing. Obviously, my to-do list is long. I have a bunch of other shit to do, but those 3 things are pushing towards. So for instance, right now I'm gearing up to release this album on CD. Shout out. New Beginnings, cassette and vinyl, which I'm waiting on the vinyl right now. So every day I do 3 things that's towards that release, because I feel like we often get lost in the sauce and do other shit. Shiny object syndrome, where, I should be doing this, but I'm going to make a beat instead. Yeah, I'm kind of getting lost in the sauce of this conversation, but to bring it full circle.
You're good, man. You're good.
There's a book called War of Art, which talks about resistance, which is kind of what I just explained, is like you have all this other stuff that you need to be doing, but making a beat is far more fun. So let's put off the important thing to do the fun thing.
Yeah, man. That's a classic, War of Art. That one was pretty powerful for me as well.
It's a must read, and Art and Fear is kind of aligned with that in a lot of ways. A different approach. For me, Art and Fear kind of speaks to me a little bit more. Like literally before and after I release anything, I read it again. I don't read it cover to cover, but I'll pick certain parts to reread just to kind of remind me that like I'm not alone. Like these fears are normal.
Right. And that's kind of the dope part to me, is like kind of the format of some of these books, right? Because even if you've never even read it one time all the way through, they're set up in a way where you can really just kind of open it to somewhere. And if it doesn't land, you'll be surprised how often it does, probably. But if it doesn't, you can just flip to another page, and there's kind of a different idea there. And so, yeah, I'm with you. And again, I'll put all these in the show notes and description for everybody so that they can check these out if it interests them.
Indeed.
You mentioned perfectionism. And so I feel like that's sort of a form of, it's like a block, beat block, writer's block, whatever you want to call it. I think regardless of whether you make beats or you literally write books, I think you experience it to some extent. And so can you tell us a little bit about your experience with writer's block and how you view it?
I think I have a kind of controversial view on writer's block. A lot of writers are probably going to get mad at me for saying this, and I don't really believe in it. On one side, I feel like it's kind of a convenient cop-out. What I think people confuse is that writer's block isn't about not being able to write. It's about not being able to write something that you're proud of, that you feel is worthy of your time, your effort, etc. But that's kind of everyone. That's what making art is. Like you try something, it doesn't work, and you try something else, and you gotta keep trying, or else you don't get to the magic at the end of the rainbow. So you and I, and a lot of your listeners, make beats. I have an Ableton push in front of me. I know how it works. I can load up some drums. I can load up a Rhodes sound. I can load up a bass sound, and I can make a beat every day. There's nothing stopping me from doing that but myself. It's not because I don't have any ideas or whatever, but how do you get ideas? By tinkering. So my suggestion to anyone having a beat block is to force yourself, which sounds the exact opposite of what artists are supposed to do. They're supposed to wait for this inspiring moment and have magical clouds parting and beams of sunlight hitting them, and God takes over and they pour this out. And that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But usually 100 things you did before that are you trying shit and failing. So my mantra is like, I have to try 100 things to get to the good thing. I'll try the 100 things, as opposed to like just hoping that this is going to be the good thing I make today. The flip side of that is while I'm going through that process, I don't throw shit out. So I have a bunch of unfinished, or I shouldn't say unfinished because I try and complete everything. If I'm going to start a beat, I do it to completion, whether I like it or not, and I put it aside. And I'll listen to it 3 months later. I'm like, you know what? This sucks, but there's something there. And I'll develop that into something else. Or I don't. But I'm comfortable in the fact that, and maybe this comes from me being an ex-skateboarder, right? So skateboarders, we see the finished product in a skate video. We see the guy landing this crazy ass trick. It took him thousands of times failing that trick to nail it that one time that you see. So that's kind of how I look at beats, in that I just fail every day until I don't. That's how you beat beat block, is by making beats.
Thanks for coming through for this producer head sample with Cryptic One. His perspectives on imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and beating creative blocks are now yours to apply going forward. Remember to check out the full conversation in episode 3 of Producer Head for even more insights. Cryptic One is a legend in the hip-hop space, and his generosity in sharing decades of experience is not to be underestimated. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave a rating and review wherever you're listening. This helps Producer Head find its place and its people. And without you, there is no Producer Head. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Producer Head. Don't forget to head over to torubeat.substack.com and subscribe so you never miss an episode, along with some great extras like episode transcripts and access to the bi-weekly podium. The curation of my 3 favorite discoveries from on and offline over the past week. It's a 2-minute read providing you with a personal soundtrack, ideas, and inspiration that you can use immediately. I promise you do not want to miss this. Become a member of the community of producers receiving personally curated music, ideas, and inspiration to develop their craft. Subscribe at torubeat.substack.com. That is torubeat.substack.com. torubeat.substack.com. This episode was co-produced, engineered, and edited by Matthew Diaz. From Producer Head, this is Toru, and in a way, so are you. Peace.